Hi everyone, this video is going to focus on business legislation. As usual, we're going to go through the content, the basics of it, what it means, and then we're going to look at some exam questions. Before we get started, let's remind you of what's on the Teams page. So this is the Business Year 11. So in here, if you click on Files, you should be able to see Class Materials. And this recording is going to go into Teacher Recordings Unit 5, Understanding External Influences. There's going to be one there for laws and one there for technology. Okay. There it is, tech. There's the first one. The questions I talk through in the PowerPoint are the ones in this file here. What I recommend you do is have a look at those questions, attempt them, give them a go, and then continue on with this video. Okay, the other thing I will refer to as well, if we go back to class materials, is this GCSE technique sheet. This is really, really useful for how to answer certain questions. So what I'm going to do, I'll have this open and I will refer back to it as we go through. Okay, so let's get moving on with legislation. Okay. Edexcel say you need to be able to do these things, understand the purpose of legislation, why the laws are in place there. It covers two different areas, quality and consumer law and employment law. We'll talk about in a bit, and also the impact it has on a business, the costs involved, if there are any costs, and also the consequences of not following the law, of breaking the law if a business were to do that. This summarises pages 32 and 33 in the CGP revision guide. Please make sure you use that for each of these revision sessions. They are incredibly useful. Okay, so what is legislation? Okay, a lot of people, they see that word and they don't understand what it means. Well, it's basically, they are laws, the laws which businesses have to stick to. Laws are also known as Acts of Parliament. Ooh, Acts of Parliament. Okay. And so you will see laws to refer to as acts. So if you see this in a scenario, if you see an act or the Consumer Rights Act, that's a law basically, if you didn't know that already. Okay, so why do we have these laws in place? Well, basically they are to protect the consumer and also the employees as well. You guys and myself could probably relate more to consumer protection. What laws can protect us as consumers or customers of products and services? How laws are in place to making sure that consumers are treated fairly. We're looking at into a bit more detail in a second. But the other law, employment law, is there to make sure employees are in a safe working environment and where they work and where you work is fair for all your workers. Okay. We're going to cover consumer law first of all. So consumer law are basically the laws put in to protect us as consumers, to making sure the products and services we buy and we use, okay, are fair, okay, and they meet our expectations. Now, there's four different areas. There's quality, advertising. Well, we need to make sure there's laws in place to make sure that the quality meets certain standards. Businesses advertise fairly. They don't advertise a product which doesn't meet their description. Okay, making sure refunds are in place if our products and services don't meet certain standards, and also there's laws about what data what data businesses can collect, but also what they do with that data about us. Okay, and this is more important than ever, especially the fact that we're accessing what's called so-called free services online, where actually we're giving our data away quite willingly. Right, the first law we're going to look at is the Consumer Rights Act. Now, interestingly, this law has only been around since 2015. Now, there were other laws obviously in place before that, but this is the most recent up-to-date one. So this is what laws can we as consumers, what are in place to protect us. So there is a few principles to it. We're going to focus on these three. The first of all is the product must be fit for purpose. So in other words, the product which we buy or the service does the job it was designed for. Okay, so for example, let's say you wanted to buy a bucket. That bucket is designed to carry items, let's say water, without it spilling or making a hole or falling on the floor. So you buy a bucket and it's got loads of holes in, that doesn't do the job it was designed for. You buy a pair of shoes which are meant to keep your feet warm and protect your feet. And let's say that that product hasn't got a sole on, they're just literally like things just go on top of your feet. That doesn't do the job it was designed for. So the product must be what's called fit for purpose. So for example, a bike. Okay, that bike has got to make sure it uses 2 wheels and it can propel itself and it works, it doesn't fall apart. Well, that's part 3. So, but it must do its job. It is a bicycle. It uses 2 wheels and it goes from A to B. Okay, it does the job it was designed for. Next thing is the product should match its description. Now, an easiest way to think about this is where it doesn't. Let's say you go and you buy a pack of 5 donuts from the Asda, and it says on the sticker 5 jam donuts, and you get home, you open it, there's 4. Okay, there your product doesn't meet its description. Okay, it says there's 5 donuts, there's only 4 in there. Okay, that's breaking the Consumer Rights Act. It's not matching its description. So the product must be a true trade description. Okay, the size, quantity, materials made from, properties, that sort of thing. So for example, you might buy a packet of crisps and that's measured in grams, so it's weight, so let's say 20 grams, and you might find that there's only 10 grams in there. Okay, we talked about quantity, materials it's made from. Okay, if you're buying so for example, I'm going to go back to cars. So if you pay a premium for a sports car, it's made out of carbon fiber, it says it's made out of carbon fiber, you expect it. So you can order cars with a certain specification. So you might pay extra for a carbon fiber roof. And when that car comes, it doesn't have that. That doesn't meet its description. Okay, so you have to make sure your product matches its description. All right, and finally, the one which we probably come across quite a lot is the product should be of satisfactory quality. Now, interestingly, it doesn't say there it's got to be of good or exceptional quality. It must be satisfactory. Now, depending on the product and the actual branding and what you'd expect, there's going to be different levels of quality. Okay, so for example, you're going to spend more money on a premium brand of clothing, which will have sort of a exceptional quality. So you get something from Primark, you understand it's cheap, but you understand it's not going to last as long as stuff you buy from Gucci or Armani, whatever. You would expect an exceptional quality from a brand which costs significantly more. At least you'd expect so anyway. However, at the very least, the product should be of satisfactory quality. It shouldn't break after a couple of uses. I'll give you an example. Bought a pair of jeans a couple of years ago. I remember this specifically. And I don't know about you, but when I buy jeans, it's difficult to get exactly the right size. Maybe I've got weird length legs and a weird size waist. But anyway, I found this pair of jeans. I tried them on. They were perfect. And I was so pleased. Oh, you know, absolutely perfect pair of jeans. Quality. I loved them. So anyway, go home, get changed, ready to go out for the night, get into the car, sit in the car. Next thing you know, it rips. It rips from the front to the back, literally the whole crotch, just massive ripped. My wife was in hysterics. She found it hilarious. I was gutted, okay, because I finally found a perfect pair of jeans which fit me really well, and they ripped. They weren't of satisfactory quality. They weren't good, okay. And what do we do if that happens? Well, we take it back, and most of the time you take it back with your receipt and you can get a refund, okay? And that's where the law kicks in. So if the products don't meet these requirements, so it's not fit for purpose, doesn't match its descriptions, not of satisfactory quality, customers can ask for their money back, a repair, or a replacement. Now, it might be down to the actual individual company or the business, depending on which of those they will do, but at the very least, the business has to do one of those things, okay? And you guys know, if you buy a product, it doesn't meet that quality, you can go back. Okay, you can go back and ask for your money back, a replacement, or a voucher. Okay, and that is because of the Consumer Rights Act. Now, let's move on to employment law. So what laws are in place to protect employees? Okay, now there's not just one law to cover all these things. There's many different types of law. Okay, but employment law covers all the many different acts which cover these 4 areas: pay, discrimination, recruitment, and health and safety. Okay, so the first one is pay. Now this is focused around the UK law. Okay, I'm not going to cover sort of international law because pay in different countries varies. Hence why a lot of companies might outsource or might have a factory in a different company, in a different country, because you don't have to pay people as much as if you would in the UK, because in the UK there is a national minimum wage. Okay, so if you're age 24 and under, but above the school leaving age of 16 at some point, without the, I don't know exactly when it is, you are entitled to receive national minimum wage. Okay, now there are different levels depending on your age, so 16, 18, and so on and so on. Please don't ask me what it is at the moment because it keeps on changing. It might be, I think it's around between £9 and £10 per hour. I think I don't know. I might Google it afterwards. You can just Google it and pause it. That's the national minimum wage. By law, companies have to pay the national minimum wage to people. Okay. A lot of companies choose to pay a bit more than that, but there is a minimum you are entitled to earn as a wage. If you're 25 and over, this then changes to the national living wage, which is slightly more than the national minimum wage. Salary is slightly different, but salaries have to meet this as well. Remember, salary is where you get paid, you're given a certain amount of money over the year, and that's split per month. You get paid per month, and that obviously 12 times you get paid monthly. Wages get paid weekly, daily, fortnightly, but it's measured on per hour basis. Okay, so by law you must make sure your business must pay the national minimum wage, and that protects the employees. That means if you get a job, you know you're going to earn a certain amount, okay, at least. Next thing is recruitment. Recruitment is the process of giving people jobs. Okay. The main rule is you can't discriminate. You can't discriminate when you employ people. So, for example, you can't say must be a male, must be a female. You can't discriminate unless the job has a particular element to it where gender is a particular part of it. I'm trying to think of a typical example. Maybe we'll come back to that. But you can't discriminate. So if you've got 3 or 4 people applying for a particular job, let's say a building job, one is a Christian, one's no religion, one is a Muslim. The job to the person with no religion for any just based upon that. That is discrimination. You can't discriminate based on gender. So let's say there is a job for a business studies teacher, and you got one male, one female. You can't give it to the female over the male just because they are female. Okay, and other sort of areas there you cannot discriminate against. Okay, so you can't discriminate against people purely on those reasons. Okay, and that goes against the Equality Act. You can see that is the Equality Act, which applies to, is kind of part of employment law. Okay, next thing is recruits must have the legal right to work in the UK. So if you were born in the UK, then you have a legal right to work in the UK. At the moment, it gets a bit messy because of Brexit, but let's say we are still in the European Union. So that means if you're part of the European Union, that trade bloc, we have what's called freedom of movement. That means, let's say, a Spanish person who's part of the EU, they wanted to work in the UK. They've got a Spanish passport. They could just quite easily move to the UK and then get a job without any questions asked. You don't need to have what's called a visa, okay? But you've got a passport to show you are a member of the European Union, okay? That means you can work there. Now, let's say there's somebody coming over from somebody from, let's say Thailand, wanted to come and work in the UK, okay? They're not part of the European Union. So if that was the case, they would have to apply for a work visa. A visa is like a document to approve that they can do that, because you could come over on a tourist visa where you're allowed to come and visit for so many months, but after that you've got to go back to Thailand, but you're not allowed to work unless you've got a working visa. So that means as an employer, you've got to check that person has the correct documentations. Okay, so if they've applied for a job, okay, where are you from? Okay, have you got a working visa? Yes, that's fine. If they haven't, you are breaking the law if you give that person the job. Okay. A lot of people do if they go traveling. Let's say to Australia, and you want to you go traveling there. You can have like a visitor's visa. We can go and travel around, but you can't work there. But you could potentially get a working visa for a temporary amount of time. So you'd have to get that visa in order to work there. Otherwise, you're breaking the law. Okay. Now, unfortunately, what a lot of some businesses do, they break the law, and they will have people, immigrants living in the country without that documentation, work for them illegally. They pay them cash in hand, and they'll pay them below the minimum wage. Okay. They make sure it's off the books. So it's blatantly breaking the law, but you can think there's people who come to the UK to work illegally because they're going to earn more there than they were perhaps in their other country, or maybe the country they're coming from is war torn, and it's dangerous for them to be there. They come to the UK and they haven't got the documentation to work. They haven't got work visas. They've got here illegally, and so they'll try and get any sort of work they can. And they're the business of breaking the law by employing or paying people to work who haven't got the documentation, but the employers are saving money by not paying the minimum wage. Okay, so that is recruitment. The next law is discrimination itself. So, for example, pay. You can't pay one person more than somebody else if they're doing the same job. You might see this in the news quite what's called the gender pay gap, where you will see businesses pay, for some reason, males more than females, even though they do exactly the same job. Okay, so all employees must be paid the same if they do the same job or work of equal value for the same employer. You can't discriminate against. Okay, if you do, they're entitled to pay compensation. Now, at the same time, employees could either on purpose or without knowing discriminate against a customer or other employees. So, for example, let's say it's really, really busy in a shop, and one person for some reason chooses to serve female customers over male customers. Okay, they are discriminating against the male customers. So if an employee is accused of discrimination either by a customer or even by other employees, the company could be held responsible. And that's where staff training comes in, making sure they understand where, that they can't discriminate against other people for one reason or another. And also that means they have many company policies about equal rights. That means if somebody gets a job with a company, they agree to policies, and that means if they were to go against those policies, in other words, they are being discriminatory, that means that company can actually have more grounds to fire that person because they're not meeting those company policies. Okay, so as a business, you've got to have a lot of stuff in place to making sure you are following employment law but not having any sort of discrimination. Okay. And finally, health and safety at work. Now, the example there is like a building site, but this occurs in any work environment. It's making sure the work environment is safe for the employees to work, and any sort of risks are aware of. And if there are any risks, there are procedures put into place to making sure it is as minimal as possible. So risk assessments, we have to do risk assessments at school. Okay, to making sure, for example, if there's a fire, what we have to do, if there's a risk of a local lockdown, so we talk about lockdown procedures. If there's any, so at the moment with restrictions due to COVID, there's huge risk assessments has to be done, and what we put into place to reduce those risks. Okay, so risk assessments happen in every single business. Accident records, if there is an accident, we have to make sure that's logged down, written in a book. We have to make sure there's a certain amount of first aiders on site to make, or what happens in an emergency. And also staff training. We are, as a school, we have staff training on so pupils with certain health needs if there's an emergency. So we have training on epilepsy, we have training on asthma, and all these sorts of things we have to make sure the school makes sure the staff are trained in certain areas. And obviously, let's say in specific jobs, let's say in construction, you've got to have training on certain equipment. So if you're using a particular drill or certain piece of equipment, you have to make sure you've been trained on it before you actually do it, because it's dangerous otherwise. We have to make sure that people are provided with correct protective equipment. So, for example, on a building site, you have hard hats. You have you're provided with ear protection if you're using loud equipment, eye protection. If you're using any sort of equipment which could generate sparks or dust or anything like that, and you can apply that to, think about it at school. If you do RM, you have to we make sure there's equipment provided in case of that. In science as well, lab coats, eye protection. Okay, well, that's what, even at the moment, we think about with the pandemic, we have PPE available to pupils if we want to, sorry, not to pupils, to staff, but also as pupils, we're providing face masks, okay? All of this is making sure our environment is safe, okay, for the employees. Okay, so let's look at some typical questions. So by all means, pause the video, have a go at this if you haven't done so already. So let's move on. So first of all, which two of the following areas are covered by employment law? So this here is a section 2 question, sorry, a section A question. So you normally have a few multiple choice anyway. So employment law. So consumer rights, well, it's not that, because that is consumer law. Yeah, consumer law. Discrimination, that is one. Okay, because businesses cannot discriminate. E-commerce, is there a law to do with e-commerce? No, that's to do with technology. So that's nothing to do with law or legislation. Okay, health and safety, that is employment laws. The employer has to make sure the environment is safe for the employee. And finally, quality of products, no, that comes under consumer law. Okay, relatively straightforward. Right. Explain one benefit to employees of employment law. I'm going to skip now back to this here, our GCSE technique. This is section A. It doesn't apply to a particular business. It's general. It's an explain question. So how do we do this? It's worth 3 marks. We make 1 point, and then we can make 2 further strands. Well, what are these strands? Well, this is a strand. This is good because this could lead to, as a result, this results in. Okay, and then what does it lead to? Well, the key thing is not everything leads to more profit. So a lot of the time your answer can result in more profit, but it's very easy to jump on that and say, okay, it's going to lead to more profit. But what can lead to? Higher sales. So this is the number of items are sold, or number of services which are sold. Customer satisfaction, better customer services, increased productivity. So if we're thinking about laws, you can make the if employment law, if we're following it correctly, it means the employee is going to be happier, which can lead to increased productivity, better communication, increased brand loyalty. So I'm not going to read them all through, but just bear in mind that not everything leads to more profit. Finally, I'm going to focus on this. No bad words. Never say you. Okay, who? Okay, you. If you write you in your answer, the person reading it is the examiner. Okay, that's not who it's aimed at. Okay, so talk about the business. Okay, rather than money, say revenue, profit, cost, capital, income. And rather than say people, well, which people? Customers, employees, employers, investors, shareholders, manager, whoever the question refers to. Okay, so let's go back. Explain 3 marks. Make 1 point with 2 strands. So explain one benefit to employees of employment law. Okay, so there's a couple of ways we could go about it. So how does employment law benefit employees? So let's start off. Oh, I'm getting used to my new pen. So employment law. Okay. Aims to, let's talk about discrimination. Reduce discrimination in the workplace. Okay, I've got 1 mark for that so far. I've explained one benefit. Okay, well, sorry, I've stated a benefit. Okay, employment law aims to reduce discrimination in workplace. Okay, well, how do we do this link? Therefore, an employee, what impact would this have on an employee? Okay, well, will not be treated differently. Will not be treated differently to other workers. Okay, 2 marks. So if you were happy that you weren't being treated differently to other workers, well, how would that make you feel? Okay, so as a result, the employee would be more likely, I spelled that wrong, to enjoy work and be more productive. There we go. It's stating the obvious, okay? So if you feel valued, if you feel as though you're not discriminated against, you're going to be happy and you're going to be more productive. Okay, let's do an alternative answer. Okay, so we can talk about recruitment. So we can say during the recruitment process, oh, sorry. During the recruitment process, potential employees, okay, will be treated fairly. Which means that, go away, oh, sorry. Which means that, what was I saying? Which means that they will all be considered equally. Okay, so this is showing your knowledge of employment law and discrimination when it comes to recruitment. Okay. So what does that mean? Okay, so as a result, all different types of applicants, sorry, all different types of potential of, of people, I like to say people, will be encouraged to apply. Okay. One benefit to employees. We could also talk about pay as well. That's another one. You could talk about a benefit to employees would be the fact that they would be paid the national minimum wage. This would result in employees, well, employees guaranteeing how much that they will be earning. Therefore, they're going to be more productive and going to work harder. Okay. Also, if you're working on an hourly rate, you could choose to work more hours or less hours if possible. Health and safety as well. You can talk about employment law, the fact that health and safety laws are in place and making sure the workplace is safe. This will mean that employees feel comfortable to work and are confident in their ability to work and therefore are more productive. Okay, so there's many different areas. So employment law covers discrimination, pay, health and safety, and also recruitment. Right then, last question. We're going back to frog bikes. Okay, so I'm going to start off here by highlighting some keywords from, is it working? There we go. Where's my little thing? Oh, I want to get my highlighter up. Why can't I get my highlighter up? Okay, never mind, we'll come back to it. So frog bikes, this was in your in-class mock. It is mainly this bit here which applies to this question, which is all about laws. As a manufacturer and retailer, frog bikes has to comply with large amounts of legislation. Okay, all bikes meet ISO International Standards Office standards. So in other words, in order to sell their bikes, there's certain standards which apply to all bikes being sold around the world. They have to meet them. This is for safety. So this ensures they are safe for children. Rules include the need for all bikes to be fitted with a chain guard and for handlebars to be safety checked. Okay, so what does this mean? So if every single bike needs a chain guard, that's going to increase the cost, isn't it? If you didn't have to put a chain guard on there, it means you haven't got to, well, you haven't got to put it on. It's going to be a less cost. Now, looking at the examples there, I can't see a chain guard on every single one, but I know I recently bought a bike for my daughter, and that has a chain guard, a little plastic thing which goes over the chain. Okay, my mountain bike hasn't got one of those because it was an adult's bike. Don't need it. Handlebars need to be safety checked as well. That's another thing. So that's going to mean more time for an employee to check it and tick off and make sure it meets a certain standard. If it doesn't, it has to be fixed. Okay. So analyze the impact on frog bikes of the legislation it has to comply when producing and selling its bikes. So let's go back to this bit, section B. So this is context questions, analyze. It's the same as discuss, but with context at each point. So we have to make 2 points with 5 strands between that. So make a point, the impact has on frog. This means that as a result, this could result in. Okay, so we need 2 points there. Right then. So let's think about this. So it's worth 6 marks. So what impact is it going to have on the legislation? So let's talk about cost first of all. We can talk about the cost of meeting these safety requirements. So we can say, so by having to meet the safety requirements, we could put in there ISO regulations. Okay, but having to meet safety requirements, ISO regulations. Okay, the costs frog bikes would have to pay or incur, that's a good word, would be higher than without the rules. Okay. For example, fitting chain guards, and the time taken for handlebar checks. Okay, so I've made my point. Okay, my point there's going to be increase in cost. Now, what is this going to lead to? Okay, so as a result of higher costs, as a result of higher costs, well, what's going to happen? As a result of higher costs, prices of the bikes may rise. Okay, so as a business, you've got to think about that extra cost. Where, you know, it's going to cost you more for the chain guards as if they weren't there to meet the regulation, and also the labour to pay for the time taken to do those checks. Okay, so that cost might go onto the price of the bikes. Okay, so what could this lead to? Okay, if the price of your bikes are going up, okay, are people going to pay? Okay, so the prices for a small business like Frog Bikes, okay, are going to be higher than some of the larger producers. So think about a company like Raleigh or let's say Giant or Trek. These are big manufacturers of bikes, so they can keep the prices low. Whereas a small manufacturer means the prices are going to be slightly higher. So as a result of higher costs, price may rise. So because we could say that the price of frog bikes, sorry, the prices of frog bikes may be higher than larger manufacturers, e.g. Raleigh, they exist, Giant, Trek. What else is that? There's all sorts. I've gone blank. etc. So what does that mean? If you were going to buy a kid's bike, if you're a parent, okay, you got a choice of an expensive independent company like Frog, or you pay a bit cheaper for like a Raleigh. Okay, what are you going to do? Okay, so the price point may be more important for some customers. Okay. As a result, sales and revenue may fall. So what you might find is parents, they probably can't afford to pay a bit more for your Frog bike because they can't afford it. Okay, despite the fact that they are going to be really, really safe because they have to meet those conditions. Okay, that's our first point. So probably got three marks for that. What's the next point? Okay, so the fact that Frog are in what's called a competitive environment, they've got to stick to this legislation, which is going to reassure their customers. So we can say the owners of Frog bikes, okay, operate in a competitive environment. Their e.g. Halfords, very competitive. Okay, so sticking to legislation will reassure potential customers who are looking to buy a bike or who are looking to buy a child's bike. Okay, oops. Okay, so the owners of Frog bikes operate in a competitive environment, e.g. Halfords, so sticking to legislation will reassure potential customers who are looking to buy a child's bike. Okay, so what does this mean that? So this means that Frog bikes will build a strong reputation. Okay, we'll choose a strong reputation for safe, good quality children's bikes. Okay, this will potentially lead to higher sales if other costs do not increase. Okay. Right. apologies for the terrible handwriting. It is shocking, but I'm still getting used to my little pen. Yeah, again, it is just expanding those points. Okay, thinking about this means that as a result, thinking about increasing revenue or sales or brand awareness or customer. We could talk about their customer satisfaction by adhering to the legislation to ensure that the bikes are safe. It's going to increase customer satisfaction because parents are going to be reassured that the product is safe and their child, the bike isn't going to break and it's going to meet certain international standards. Okay, and this could lead to increased brand awareness and also gain a good reputation for quality and for safety. Okay, that's about it for today. I hope it's been useful. Please let me know if you have any questions. Okay, thanks very much. Let's get rid of that. Take care and let's stop this. Okay, bye bye.